a low-security women's prison in rural Alabama where more than 1,400 inmates are serving time.
Hush, no one was meant to see or hear about this. At least these female inmates thought that the camera hadn't caught anything since it was an empty cell, but that was their biggest mistake. Should we start with the prison guards made to engage in steamy affairs with those they promised to protect and observe, the trans woman who raped other female inmates, or those inmates who hid contraband inside their bodies?
Because she had a gun hidden in her vagina.
Here's a list that proves that there's nothing hidden in these cold steel walls, especially with the eagle-eyed guards and security cameras. Woman stuffs fully loaded gun in vagina. Smuggling things inside a prison can be tricky business. Still, over the years there have been examples of inmates getting really creative when trying to move contraband through the tight security inside correctional facilities. While male inmates take the more daring route, female inmates have been known to employ unorthodox methods, such as smuggling all sorts of crazy things inside their private parts. One woman even smuggled a rolled-up poster of Donny Osmond.
Because she had a gun hidden in her vagina.
But perhaps the craziest story is that of a woman who had a loaded gun stuffed in her vagina. The incident occurred at the Boone County Jail in Missouri, known for its stringent security measures. Like many high-security prisons, this facility has metal detectors, body scanners, and a well-trained staff to prevent contraband from entering its walls. Despite these precautions, an inmate named Amy Wellhite managed to defy the odds. On February 18, 2021, Wellhite was processed into the Boone County prisons after being transferred from a local jail. During the intake process, inmates are subjected to thorough searches and must pass through multiple security checkpoints. However, Wellhite had concealed a 4-inch North American Arms .22 caliber mini revolver inside her vagina, evading detection by the standard security protocols. The gun, small enough to fit into the palm of a hand, was fully loaded with 5 rounds. It's a chilling thought that such a weapon could be smuggled into a place where safety should be paramount. Even more astonishing is how much of a depraved mind one has to be to conceal a loaded gun in such a tight body orifice without giving a thought to an accidental discharge of the weapon inside her. The discovery of the firearm only occurred over 2 weeks later, raising serious concerns about the effectiveness of the security measures and the potential risks to inmates and staff. How Wellhite managed to keep the gun hidden for such an extended period shows the lengths those determined to break the rules are willing to go to achieve their purpose. Wellhite pleaded guilty to a felony indictment charging her with delivery or concealment of the firearm and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. If you think this story was wild, the next story will leave you scratching your head at the sheer audacity of these inmates. Talking about silly actions, it doesn't get any worse than getting caught pants down with a female inmate inside a prison. This prison manager used his power inside the prison walls to earn some sexual favors that eventually landed him behind bars. Prison manager caught romping with female inmate. In October 2020, Steve Harris, a prison manager and father of 2, was allegedly found pants down with a female inmate at the Women's Open Prison HMP East Sutton Park. The incident reportedly occurred late in the evening, a time when the prison's daily hustle would have died down, and the surveillance of certain areas might not be as stringent. The exact location within the facility where the 2 were discovered has not been disclosed, but it is believed to be an area off limits to inmates for recreational purposes. The discovery was made by a fellow correctional officer who, upon stumbling upon the scene, immediately reported the incident to their superiors. Harris was swiftly suspended while police investigated him for engaging in sexual activity with an inmate and misconduct in public office. The investigation into the incident was thorough and multifaceted. It involved interviews with the female inmate, other prisoners, and staff members, as well as a review of surveillance footage and an examination of the physical location of the incident. The female inmate, whose identity has also been protected, was immediately offered psychological support and moved to another prison. The investigation sought to determine not only the nature and extent of the relationship between the manager and the inmate, but also whether this was an isolated incident or indicative of a larger systemic issue within the prison. Meanwhile, sources within the prison helped create another dimension to the incident, painting a picture of abuse of power by a man who held the keys to certain privileges in the facility. According to the source, he's a very important person in the prison. He holds the keys if the women want to apply for a job and helps equip them for when they leave leave prison. As news of this ugly incident became public, media outcry was immediate and undiluted, with loud calls for accountability and a re-evaluation of the policies governing staff-inmate interactions. However, the fallout from the incident was not limited to the prison manager and the inmate involved. The entire staff of the facility found themselves under a cloud of suspicion and mistrust. The prison's administration faced pressure to demonstrate that this was not reflective of a broader issue and to take steps to prevent any future occurrences. Training and monitoring protocols were reviewed, and discussions began about the need for more rigorous background checks and psychological evaluations for those in positions of power within the prison system. Yet another outrageous story that left everyone stunned at the time was the case of the fake transgender woman who raped a female prisoner. Fake transgender woman rapes female prisoner. Within the shadowed corridors of Rikers Island, a scandal erupted in 2022 that broke through the steely walls of the famed female prison and into the public consciousness. The narrative begins with an inmate at the Rose M. Singer Center on Rikers Island, identified in legal documents as Rose Doe. She raised immediate concerns about a new detainee who had been placed in the female housing unit and was identified as a transgender woman. Rose Doe was skeptical of the detainee's gender identity, especially after the individual's declaration, "I'm not transgender, I'm straight, I like women." Rose's fears escalated into reality when, on April 4th, she reported to the correctional staff that the alleged transgender woman had sexually propositioned her. Merely 2 days later, her situation worsened as she endured a groping incident in the bathroom. These complaints reached the ears of the acting warden, Floyd Phipps, who acknowledged in an email that the individual in question was not a suitable fit for RMSC, citing Rose's feelings of unsafety. Despite these clear warnings and the warden's email, the correctional officers did not relocate the alleged perpetrator from the female housing. This inaction by the correctional staff would lead to a night of horror for Rose Doe. In the early hours of April 7th, while she was asleep, the same individual who had previously harassed her exploited the vulnerability of her sleep. According to her lawsuit, perpetrator pulled down her pants and began to rape her. This alleged assault marked a catastrophic failure in the protection owed to her by the correctional facility. The response from the correctional facility to Rose Doe's allegations was, according to her, grossly inadequate. The lawsuit claims that the Department of Correction, DOC staff, did not provide the necessary medical and mental health services, nor did they properly collect, document, or review evidence related to her sexual assault claims. This purported neglect is said to have compounded the trauma experienced by Rose Doe. The implications of this incident ripple far beyond the individual case. Nicholas Liakis, the attorney representing Rose Doe, voiced concerns that such incidents could endanger the genuine transgender inmate community, who have long fought for the right to be housed according to their gender identity. The fear is that imposters could undermine the safety and rights of actual transgender inmates, leading to increased scrutiny and potential rollback of the hard-won accommodations for these individuals. We proceed to a case that shocked the Fresno community in the heart of California's Central Valley. Tina Gonzalez's sexual escapades with an inmate were so bold that she was dubbed a depraved mind by her colleagues. The depraved mind. Tina Gonzalez, a 26-year-old corrections officer, seemed to embody the dedication and integrity expected of those who don the uniform. Her role was to maintain order and ensure the safety of inmates within the confines of the jail. However, beneath the veneer of professionalism, a series of decisions would set the stage for a scandal that would tarnish the reputation of the Fresno County Jail. The incident that would lead to Gonzalez's downfall began subtly, with small infractions that escalated over time. It started with Gonzalez forming an inappropriate relationship with an inmate. As the relationship progressed, Gonzalez's judgment became increasingly clouded. She began to smuggle contraband into the jail, providing the prisoners with items that are strictly prohibited: razors, a cell phone, and even alcohol. These actions not only compromised the safety of her fellow officers, but also caused other inmates to undermine the very rules she was sworn to uphold. The situation reached a critical point when Gonzalez took the extraordinary step of cutting a hole in her uniform pants, a planned act that would make their sexual encounters easier. This was not a moment of passion gone awry. It was a calculated move that demonstrated a flagrant disregard for the law and her professional duties. But Gonzalez's act of depravity didn't end there. She went ahead to have a steamy sex session with the inmate in full view of 11 other inmates, an audience that underscored the brazen nature of Gonzalez's misconduct. This was not an isolated lapse in judgment, but a spectacle that would stun even the most seasoned officers. Assistant Sheriff Steve McComas, Gonzalez's former boss, would later describe the incident as one of the most disgusting things he had encountered in his 26 years of service. McComas, along with the rest of the department, was left to deal with the implications of Gonzalez's actions, the erosion of trust, the potential for blackmail, and the threat to the safety of everyone within the jail. The fallout from the incident was swift and severe. Gonzalez was arrested in May 2020, and the details of her actions began to emerge, painting a picture of a corrections officer who not only failed to maintain the standards of her profession, but actively subverted them. Despite her early plea and lack of criminal history, Gonzalez faced the repercussions of her misconduct, receiving a sentence of 7 months in jail followed by 2 years of probation. While most lawbreakers try to keep their crimes hidden, the same could not be said about Gonzalez or these female inmates in Puerto Rico who threw caution to the wind, hosting a raunchy fashion show from their cells. The risque models. In 2015, the female inmates at Bayamon Prison in Puerto Rico caused a stir when their provocative photo shoot went viral. The women ditched their orange jumpsuits and posed in shorts, tight blouses, and jeans, showcasing their curves and well-done makeup. In some cases, the women posed suggestively while holding each other in skimpy pajamas, and some others posed completely naked in the shower room. Their transgressions didn't stop at just taking these raunchy selfies. These female inmates went a step further by sharing the photos online through a smuggled phone. The snap shocked the warden, and a national newspaper printed the pictures. It was a big embarrassment to the warden as well as the prison's security officers, and as expected, the inmates' rebellious actions were met with stiff consequences. The warden sanctioned a strict crackdown and intense searching of the cell blocks, with trained sniffer dogs deployed to find the mobile phone used to perpetrate the crime. However, the search led to even wilder discoveries. According to a source from the jail, apart from mobile phones, the prison guards found homemade weapons and knives inside the cells of 2 women who posed in the viral photos. Unsurprisingly, the 2 women in question were serial offenders who had racked up more than 20 disciplinary offenses during their time in prison. Their latest naked mischief was only a new dimension in their unending appetite for breaking the rules and rebelling. The apprehension of the 2 mischief makers quickly led to more of the women who were caught in the mess being found out. Although sanity was quickly restored to the prison, the incident has forever cast a dark shadow on the integrity of the Bayamon prison. Next up, we have the curious story of the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility in New Jersey, where more than 31 prison officials were implicated in a circle of sexual violence, assault, and misconduct. They literally turned the prison into a mad doghouse. Female inmates sexually assaulted by prison guards.
And know all too well how poorly it was operated, both from the physical building, the Edna Mahan facility, to be closed.
The Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women, established in the early 1930s as the Clinton Farms, was envisioned as a beacon of progressive reform. However, the institution's history has been marred by recurring allegations of sexual misconduct by staff members, casting a shadow over its legacy. Reports of sexual abuse at Edna Mahan date back to the late 1970s, signaling deep-rooted systemic issues. The facility has faced numerous lawsuits over the years, with inmates alleging sexual violence and exploitation by correctional officers. Although these legal battles have often resulted in large settlements, the problem has persisted. However, a pivotal moment came in 2016 when a federal investigation exposed a pervasive pattern of sexual abuse at Edna Mahan. The findings revealed that inmates were often coerced into silence, facing threats and retaliation if they dared to speak out. Despite reforms, including increased surveillance and a proclaimed zero-tolerance stance on sexual abuse, the culture of misconduct persisted. The situation reached a critical point in January 2021, when a series of raids conducted by correctional officers led to new allegations of abuse. The raids, described by inmates as violent and traumatic, resulted in multiple injuries and added to the growing outcry against the facility's management. The systemic failures at Edna Mahan, including inadequate reporting mechanisms and a lack of accountability, have perpetuated a cycle of abuse and fear. Whistleblowers and advocates have faced significant obstacles in their efforts to bring attention to the issues within the prison, often encountering resistance and retaliation from the administration. The culmination of these events has led to widespread calls for the closure of Edna Mahan Correctional Facility. Advocates argue that the institution's history of abuse and the January 2021 suspension of 31 guards are indicative of an environment that cannot be reformed, and that a new approach is needed to ensure the safety and rehabilitation of female inmates. The narrative of Edna Mahan Correctional Facility mirrors the ongoing struggle to uphold the rights and dignity humanity of female inmates. It underscores the urgent need for systemic change and accountability within the criminal justice system, particularly in the treatment of women behind bars. Still on the bad behaviors of prison guards, the next case captures an overzealous female officer getting too rough on a handcuffed inmate. Female officer beats up handcuffed inmate. Elmore Correctional Facility, a name synonymous with discipline and reform, became the backdrop for an incident that would challenge the very principles it stood for. The facility witnessed an event that would leave a permanent dent in its reputation in December 2014. Juanice Cole, a female prison officer entrusted with the responsibility of overseeing the welfare and conduct of inmates, stepped far beyond the boundaries of her role. The CCTV footage that captures the shocking incident shows Cole in a moment of inexplicable violence. In the short clip, Cole can be seen striking a handcuffed male convict twice in the head with a force that left onlookers stunned. But her fury did not subside. After a brief heated exchange with her colleagues, she returned to deliver another blow to the already subdued inmate. Cole then steps away and calmly takes her jacket off, while her colleagues check if the man is okay. The video then seemingly shows Cole's colleagues trying to prevent her from approaching the injured convict, who continues to lie motionless on the floor. Cole was fired following an investigation into the December 2014 incident. The evidence against Cole was as clear as water, and her unceremonious dismissal sent ripples through the ranks of the Department of Corrections. Edmund Cooper, once a respected shift commander, found his career abruptly terminated for his failure to report the assault, a lapse that cost him 13 years of service. His failure to act led to his dismissal, a decision that was later upheld by the Alabama State Personnel Board. While speaking on the incident, Department of Corrections Bob Horton highlighted the importance of enforcing stringent punishments to maintain the highest level of professionalism for officers within the prison systems. In his words, the officer's treatment of the inmate and the failure to report the incident is not in keeping with DOC standards of conduct. The department took appropriate action by terminating the former officers as a result of its own investigation. A third officer, who was also caught in the CCTV footage, is said to have resigned to avoid the disgrace of a dismissal. Just like that, the careers of 3 seasoned officers ended in controversy based on the silly actions of one. The dark side of women's prisons is mostly associated with sexual assault in cases of smuggled contraband. However, down in Honduras, some female inmates proved that they could be just as dangerous as their male counterparts. Dozens killed in women's jail riot.
Authorities say gang members entered a section of this women's prison where rival gang members were held. Then inmates were shot and others were burnt in the facility located in Tamara, north of Honduras's capital.
In the early hours of a fateful Tuesday in June 2023, the walls of a Honduran women's prison echoed with terror as a notorious gang unleashed a monstrous attack. Armed with machetes, guns, and flammable liquid, they executed a slaughter that would mark one of the darkest days in the country's penal history. Weeks leading up to the attack, the air was thick with tension as inmates reported threats from the notorious Barrio 18 gang. These were not idle threats. They were signs of the carnage that was to come. On that fateful Tuesday morning, the gang members, who were also inmates, capitalized on severe security lapses. They were inexplicably armed with guns and machetes, weapons that should have been impossible to smuggle into the facility. The guards, whose role was to protect and control, were rendered helpless as the gang members overpowered them, confiscated their keys, and secured control over the prison. For hours, gunfire echoed through the cell blocks, machetes struck with lethal precision, and flammable liquid was used to ignite a fire that would consume the lives of dozens of inmates. The aftermath of the attack at the women's prison in Tamara revealed a tragic picture of loss and despair. The corridors, once filled with the voices of the inmates, now echoed with a haunting silence, punctuated only by the sobs of grieving families gathered outside the prison gates, desperate for news of their loved ones. The response from the authorities was swift but fraught with difficult questions. President Xiomara Castro, labeling the event as monstrous, took immediate action by dismissing the security minister, Ramon Sabillon, and appointing Gustavo Sanchez, the head of the National Police, as his replacement. Officials also admitted to the possibility of human failures, as the gang members had not only acquired prohibited weapons, but also managed to destroy security cameras in what appeared to be a meticulously planned attack. attack. Furthermore, the sheer scale of weapons recovered, 18 pistols, an assault rifle, 2 machine pistols, and 2 grenades, underscored the severity of the oversight. Meanwhile, the impact on the families of the victims was immeasurable. The prison, which should have been a secure facility, had become a killing ground, leaving families to mourn the loss of 46 women whose lives were brutally cut short. In the end, the tragic incident left many more questions than answers. How could the gang have orchestrated such a massacre from within the prison's walls? What measures would the authorities take to prevent such a disaster from happening again? And how could the families of the victims ever find peace? From here, we head over to the cupboards at HMP Birmingham, where what was supposed to be a secret romp date was caught on camera. Female officer romps with inmate in cupboard. Prison cameras catch many strange things, but the people in the control room at HMP Birmingham were still blown away when they saw what was happening inside a store cupboard in the Category B lockup. The place had been transformed into a makeshift brothel by 25-year-old prison guard Shania Begum, who operated under the guise of supervising inmate Joshua Mullins to engage in various sexual activities in the location. In January 2024, a court heard that the duo would repeatedly head to the store cupboard for play fighting, flirting, heavy petting, and penetrative sex. With the frequency of their visits and how they threw caution to the winds, it didn't take long for prison bosses to grow suspicious, leading to the installation of a camera that caught them red-handed. The evidence from the CCTV was damning, at least for Shania Begum. It caught the 25-year-old performing oral sex on Mullins on 2 separate occasions. The CCTV also showed that on some occasions Begum's radio would go off, but she would ignore it. She had also been interrupted by members of staff during those times, but neither of these caused her to rethink her illicit affair with Mullins. Despite these close shaves, Begum, having much to lose, continued her sex dates with Mullins until she was finally arrested. Confronted by irrefutable proof of her sexual trysts caught on camera, Begum admitted misconduct in a public office and was subsequently jailed at Birmingham Crown Court. During her sentencing, the prosecution led by Daniel Oscroft argued that Begum's conduct undermines confidence in the prison system, causes problems with prison order, and has an impact on the stability and welfare of the prison estate. Although the defense argued that Mullins had exploited Begum, it had little or no impact on the final ruling. The judge affirmed that she had consensual sex with Mullins, and as such had to be held responsible for her actions. Next up is another case that brought the integrity of the Clark County Jail in Indiana to disrepute, a compromised prison guard selling the keys to the female unit to sex-starved male inmates. The result is a big mess. Inmates raped after male inmates bribed guard. A night of unspeakable fear gripped the Clark County Jail in Indiana, where 28 women faced a night of terror. On the fateful evening of October 24, 2021, the jail, which housed both male and female inmates, was ostensibly a secure environment, with strict protocols meant to protect its inhabitants. However, the integrity of this institution was compromised when, according to court documents, a jail officer succumbed to the lure of bribery. It is alleged that this officer facilitated the nightmarish night by providing keys to male inmates for $1,000. The male inmates, now armed with access and opportunity, breached the segregated areas of the jail where the female inmates resided. After that, the women, unsuspecting and vulnerable, were subjected to hours of terror as the men roamed freely, intimidating, assaulting, raping, and threatening the female inmates. As the night wore on, the gravity of the situation became apparent. 2 women, amidst the chaos, reported being raped. Several others claimed they had suffered injuries and remained traumatized from the events that played out that evening. According to the lawsuit filed on behalf of the women, the attack happened for hours, and their cries for help went unanswered through the entirety of the invasion. The complaint stated, amazingly, even though there were surveillance cameras positioned in locations that showed the male detainees accessing the women's pods, and even though the incident involved multiple male, SIC, detainees, and dozens of victims over an extended period of time, not a single jail officer on duty that night came to the aid of the plaintiffs and the other victims. Following the incident, Clark County Jail was subjected to intense review. Security measures were questioned, policies scrutinized, and the personnel were evaluated for complicity or negligence. The community rallied around the victims, their outrage fueling a demand for justice and reform. To douse the growing tensions, the sheriff's office issued statements, assuring the public that such a breach would never occur again. They promised to hold those responsible accountable and to implement changes that would prevent a recurrence. However, for the victims of that night, these assurances came too late. The damage had been done, and the path to healing was only just beginning. That's all we have for you on this video. For more content like this, make sure to click the card showing on the screen.